What is going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the bearded comic bro, and I am joined by Brian Buccellato. Welcome to the show.
Hey there. How's it
I'm
going?
good. I'm excited. Man, you've written some great books. You were obviously you did your stuff you did on the Flash. But honestly, the first time I got exposed to you was Chicken Devil, and ironically, I think it's probably one of the first times you got exposed to me because my wife and I do a comic book themed cooking show, and we use one of your recipes from Chicken Devil.
Yeah, how often do you guys get to do recipes from comics?
So I think we've done like 8 episodes now of our show.
Wow.
It started with Green Arrow, his spicy chili. It was in one of those like annual type issues back in '82 or something. It actually lists out the ingredients of how to make Green Arrow spicy chili. And I was like, that'd be a really funny way to do a show. And people liked it. So then like surprisingly enough, there's a lot of recipes in books like Jason
Wow.
Aaron's Southern Bastards. He has his mom's like apple pie recipes in it. And so
That's
people now
right.
start to find them, and so when I saw the hot chicken sandwich in Chicken Devil, I was like, man, we got to try it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
So
The only thing I will say about the recipe is that I think you substituted a spicy oil for the Calabrian chili.
yeah,
Calabrian chili is oil is not spicy, really. It's got a little bit of a kick, but really it's just like it's like a different flavor. Um, and it started out kind of as a hoot because there was a period of time when my wife and I were watching like all the cooking shows, and
yeah.
like that was like Bobby Flay's go to was Calabrian chilies. So one day I went on Amazon and I found like a jar of the chilies. I found the chili oil, and so I started putting that on everything. And so when I decided to make a hot chicken recipe, it went in there. But I think yours was probably even spicier than mine because of that.
I think it was because I remember looking it up. I'm like, I can't find this at the store anywhere. And then I
Amazon.
found it on Amazon. I'm like, well, I don't have time for that. So I was like, we'll just replace it with a chili oil. That I'm sure that's fine. And whew, it was hot, but it was good. It was
Thanks,
good.
man.
So kudos. Was that your recipe or like?
Yeah, I made it up. I mean, like I had this fixation on hot chicken sandwiches. Like in LA, I want to say around the time I was doing or starting to think about Chicken Devil, like it was like a thing. There's a
Yeah.
place called Howlin' Ray's that's really close to me. That is like, I think it's probably like the one in LA. I went there in I want to say 2019, and back then like there was like lines. You'd have to line up like 2 hours. And so my friend was in town from New York, and we actually did the line. Like we waited 2 hours, and like we were taking videos, and it was a really great chicken sandwich. So that was kind of the inspiration for Chicken Devil in a lot
That,
of ways.
that's so good. And I wanna hop into Chicken Devil a little bit because of that. But before we do, how did you get into comics? Like, have you always had a love for comics, or did this kind of come about later?
No, no. So I mean, I grew up reading comics. I grew up in the '70s and '80s, and my heyday, my period was it was John Byrne, Chris Claremont X Men. It was Walt Simonson on Thor, Bob Layton on Iron Man. All the Frank Miller on Daredevil, and then Batman. All that stuff, all that
Yeah.
classic, like late '70s, early '80s into like the mid '80s. So I was a big comic fan. So was my brother. We both got into. We grew up in New York, and we
Okay.
both went. He first. He's older than me. Got into art and design high school, and so I followed in his footsteps, and I didn't graduate, but whatever, drop out. But really, like he transformed that into like a career for like decades because he did an internship at Marvel. It was like a whole thing, like for a whole semester, half a year. His junior year, he didn't go to school; he went to Marvel to intern, and so like that was like amazing because I would get all the photocopies of the stuff that was coming out. I remember like She Hulk, like John Byrne She Hulk art, like
Yep.
big 17 by 11
Ah,
photocopies he would come home with. Like it was like a like magical time. Like it was around the time of Dark Knight, and like it was just like so loved comics. Um, then after I ended up dropping out of high school, I had like a break from comics, like I just other
okay.
things.
Yeah.
I did intern when I was 18 at Marvel for a bit, and but then I didn't really return to comics until I went to NYU, and then of course I owed them a bunch of money, and so I got sort of not kicked out, but I couldn't go back to college. Like I found a way to go from being high school dropout to getting into NYU, and then I screwed that up because that's kind of what the long road. Anyway,
It
so
happens.
I was working, I was working at a steel company in Long Island City, and my brother had moved to California, and it was just at the dawn of coloring comic book age, right? Photoshop and stuff like that. So he's like, "Hey, why don't you move to LA and I'll teach you how to color comics?" And so that's how I got back into comics in 1994.
Okay.
Was working for my brother. He taught me how to color, and I actually supported myself for 20 years coloring comics. Um, had a kid. Had a kid, got married, got divorced in that order. And all the time, raised a family coloring comic books, but that sort of ignited my passion for creativity. And before I sort of settled in the lane of what I was truly into, which is the writing side.
Yeah.
But it wasn't in comics. It was actually I was you're in LA and you love movies and all that media, all that stuff, right? Like
Right.
comics and animes and whatever. So I was like, I'll be an actor. So I tried that for a couple years, but have had that shaved head since I was 20. Gangbanger auditions. It was the 90s. I'm half Puerto Rican. I was probably more tan than I am now. So I did enough of that stuff to realize I wanted to be on the other side of the camera. So I
Nice.
taught myself how to write over the course of 10 years,
Okay.
writing less and less crappy stuff until passion meets skills. And at some point, I had the opportunity to start writing, and it was because of Francis Manipool, because I was his colorist. And when New 52 launched, they offered him the gig to write and draw it. I was already a good friend of his and his colorist, and he had never written anything, and he knew I'd put all this time into learning how to write. So he's like, "Why don't you write it with me?" And that just sort of blew open the doors for me in terms of a career as a writer, and I've been writing professionally ever since.
That is, I love, that's why I love asking a question. Like, I mean, I feel sometimes so repetitive, like, how'd you get into comics? But everyone's story is so different, right? Because
Different path.
your path was hey, you're coloring comics, and through that you have a connection, and then you're like, and you're developing your writing, and then boom, you have an opportunity to do what you end up loving, like you said, is writing comics. So once Flash happened, that kind of then, like you said, opened the door for you for continuing
Yeah,
writing
so
comics.
yeah, and other things too, like so, I wrote a lot of screenplays that nobody would read. But once I became the Flash writer, a script I wrote in 2006 got me reps in 2000 like 11 or 12. So then opportunities started happening there. And it's all the grind. It's
Right.
all a lot doing a lot of free work, and then sometimes you get the opportunity to get paid to do the work. But I love writing so much that I put in all the time. And so, when these gigs, they're actually like employment started coming around. It was just, I mean, it was a great feeling, and to this day, I love it. Like I'm always fortunate anytime I can do a book on my own, or find a project that somebody wants me, and it's something that excites me creatively, and then I get paid to do it. I mean, that's crazy. You
Yeah.
know,
So you said you kind of got into, from doing the coloring aspect to then writing. Do you still dabble in coloring, or are you kind of more focused now fully into the writing aspect of comics?
I say that I'm retired. So
Okay.
so I did it for a lot of years, and I mean, I personally got burnt out coloring.
Okay.
And at a certain point, Francis decided he wanted to color his own work. And the only reason why I was still coloring really was my collaborations with Francis. This was around 2015, 16 ish. It was like sort of at the end of our Detective Comics run
Yep.
when we kind of went our separate ways because I got into the Universal TV. I'm sorry, the Universal Feature Writing Fellowship which was like this. He got paid. It's a paid fellowship to learn story development and screenwriting from the studio side.
Right.
And so I kind of like dropped off of comics for a little while, and then he did his coloring thing, and he does it all now like in one sort of thing. And I just was sort of happy to leave that behind because I had done so many hours
Right.
coloring comics that I was just done with it.
So once you went into kind of taking a little break from comics after doing some writing with it, working on screenwriting and doing stuff like that, what drew you back into the world then of writing comics?
Well, I mean, I think we all have these like big goals, right? We all want to achieve all these things, and I think as a writer, like you have to have that hunger, otherwise you're going to quit, right? And then you're not a writer. At least that could be a hobby, but like if you
Right.
truly want to do it, you've got to keep striving for something more. And so film and television and going through the optioning things that you write, like Cannibal or a couple other things that I optioned. Even when you get paid to write the script, the chances of it actually happening are really low, right?
Right.
So I've gotten paid to write, I've gotten paid to develop, but after a while, there's like only so many things that you can write and create and invest your whole time into without anyone ever seeing it.
Yeah.
So going back to comics, I mean, the idea that like even if you only have 5 to 10,000 people, 20,000, 5,000, 4,000, however many people are reading your book, that's better than zero.
Right.
Like I did a TV incubator in 2019, which was an amazing experience. It's like it got me into the WGA and developed my own show, and it was like really personal about growing up in Queens.
Yeah.
Divorced mom, 1977. It was like the year of Son of Sam, the year of the blackout, and the main character was basically me. But the sort of genre twist is that he couldn't accept his parents' breakup, so like he created an imaginary friend, which was an anthropomorphic ape that was basically like Cornelius, but like in a James Bond suit. And it's like, but like it's like one of my favorite things I've ever written. I
Yeah.
put a lot of me in it, and then when they didn't take any of the projects out when we were done, it was like crushing because now it's like, okay, well, I have this thing that I can't do anything with because there's $150,000 against it
Right.
because that's what we were paid, right? So I think that's the thing like that really like made me go, I need to figure out how to get back into comics.
Yeah.
Because one, you have the satisfaction of seeing the thing and other people seeing the thing, but you also have more control,
Yeah.
and that's the tough part, like when you sell your idea, even Chicken Devil, right? Like I co-own Chicken Devil with Aftershock. I don't control what happens to it, like in film and television. I just
Right.
participate in it. So like, you know, you give something up to get something, I guess. But
Right.
at least when you have the comic, you have the damn comic, and
But at
that's
least you can
that's
see it and people get to read the story and it's like, hey, this is, I've talked to a handful of creators who are screenwriters that, like you said, like written a lot of stuff and gotten paid money for it, like, and they're fine with it, but like people don't get to see it because it doesn't come to fruition. And so like there is something, that itch of, I'm sure as a creative talent, that you want to see something that you believe in, that you've worked on, to say like, I want people to see this. I don't even care at this point if I get paid. I want people to see something.
the only reason why you write is because you want to share what's inside
Yeah.
you on some level, right? It could be popcorn cinema, it could be ninja comics, whatever it is. Like you're trying to share something of yourself with people, and so there's the other side of that. Someone has to see it for you to be able to share it. Like just otherwise you can write a diary. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So
So, what's your process then for comics? Because I feel like Chicken Devil, and then I want to talk about Midlife a little bit too. You know, does it come from real life situations? Does it come from looking at it from as a screenwriter, or do you kind of separate that and look at it differently as a comic book writer? Like, what's your writing process then?
sure, I think that the real writing is writing to me, right?
Okay.
So the difference between writing a comic book or writing a TV show or writing a short story, as long as you know the rules of the medium, you can write in any genre, and you can write horror, you can write comedy, you can write TV, but you just have to learn the rules, and then usually your passion and your interests will gravitate towards where you're best at. You're best at the thing that you probably like most. I mean, usually, all things be equal. Um, for me, the process just starts with what do I want to say, like what's exciting to me, what's interesting to me. So if I look at like how Chickendale came about was I was watching a lot of Barry, the TV show Barry, and I was like
Yes.
what would be my version of Barry, right? And it's like I like the dark, the black, the black comedy, the dark humor,
Yep.
that sort of thing. It's really interesting, like ultraviolet mixed with funny, like those are all interesting to me. So I was like, what would happen if my family? What if I got involved with the mob? Like, let's say my partner, embezzled money and owed that money to the mob, and as a result, my family was murdered. How would I get revenge when I have no special skills? Never been in the army, can't shoot straight. Like, how would I get revenge? And that was really the impetus for Chicken Devil, about a guy who fails upwards,
Yeah.
to try and get revenge. So it's like a Punisher type story, or a revenge story of a guy who's ill equipped.
Yeah.
And so it's just by putting myself in a sort of a well known sort of genre, like a well trod upon little area, and find my little way into that. So that's how Chicken Devil started. Um, Midlife is sort of a similar thing. Midlife was me. How would I be a superhero? Like, what would it be like to be 50 years old and be a superhero?
Yep.
So the last two projects that I've done, creator owned, with the exception of No One, which is its own thing, I'm doing with Kyle, which is us trying to do like superheroes and The Wire, and the
Which is
biggest,
also
taking
so
these
freaking
huge
good.
swings. Oh, thanks. Like, that one's an enormous amount of work and responsibility in a different way. So that's how I approach it, and I think, for anyone who wants to be a writer, or go down that path, it's really just about understanding who you are as a person, and what you have to say that is potentially universal, right? Like, we all have life experiences. It's how do we turn that into an interesting, sort of story or allegory or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, we have to find ways into those worlds. When I do a superhero comic, or let's say I do, something for DC or whatever, I always try to find, like, what's me about the thing that I'm given. Like,
Yeah.
how do I put myself in there? Like, when Francis and I started on Flash #1 with the New 52, we were overwhelmed. It was our first writing gig. It was a big #1, first time, when they relaunched all the #1s. It was a huge responsibility. It was very overwhelming. So we said, "What the hell? Let's write about how Barry gets overwhelmed by too much
Yeah.
going on and too much input." So if you remember the first arc, that's what happens to him, is that he's overwhelmed by seeing and reacting to everything all at once. And so that's like literally how we came up with that story. It's like, we're overwhelmed. Let's overwhelm him. And so I
Wow.
think you can take those lessons into writing. Um, and it's just a matter of honing who you are as a writer. And I think this is something I learned from my time at Universal, and even in the TV incubator I did, is that you are in some ways a brand. Like, what you write about, it's about specialization, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're out for a job, any kind of job, whether it's writing a comic or writing a TV show or getting a job to write a feature film, whatever, like, they want to know, why are you the right person to write this story out of all the people? Because if you're in the room, all things being equal, you know how to write. They know you know how to write. So it's not
Right.
about, can you write, because there's thousands of people who can write. It's, why are you the choice for this project?
Love that.
And so there's some degree, it's like a specialization, or like, the things that you do well, or the experiences of your life, are the things that you talk about when you pitch yourself for a job. Oh, well, I think I can, do this because of these life experiences. I pitched a Frankenstein movie to Universal, where I basically took my experiences with my father's death, and I used that as because when you pitch a story, when you pitch a show or something like that, usually you lead with a personal story
Right.
to attach. So that going in, then, okay, this person has a vested interest in the story that they're trying to tell. And so I think that's how you should approach every story, is like, why am I writing this story?
Yeah.
You know?
Does does the process change at all though for you? Because you talked about your co-writing books, like with Francis, with with No One, with Kyle Higgin. Like, is there a process that changes a little bit, or does it just adapt? Maybe you have to adapt a little bit of, you have someone else that you're bouncing ideas off of. Like you said, you both were overwhelmed with the Flash book, so you're like, let's make Barry overwhelmed. Like, what's that change process for you?
I don't know if it's a change so much as,
Okay.
I think the only change has to be mental, right? You have
Yeah.
to be okay with the idea that it's not 100% you, right? That's the only hurdle that you really have to
Okay.
jump over. Is that when you're in any kind of partnership, if you're in a writer's room, like right now, I'm doing this interactive series, and I'm the head writer, right? And so there's a few other people in the room. I think we have three. And so, one of the lessons for me, this is my first time being in charge, is learning that I don't have to write the whole thing.
Yeah.
Everything doesn't have to be my idea or come from me, or like, I will set the things that I think are important, that need to be hit, and then let people do what they do, and then we come back together and we talk it out. And then it's like, either that's a great idea, let's change these things so that they now reflect this thing, or, you know what, that doesn't work because down the road this is going to happen. And so, although it's a great idea, it doesn't work within the context of what we're doing. So it's just conversations. It's smart people who are creative talking through what I call like a creative problem solving. Because all writing is like it's a weird creative math,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like you come up with an ending for a story, and then you have to sort of deconstruct how you earn that ending, sort of.
Yeah. So we you kind of mentioned it a little bit of midlife, or how to be a superhero at 50. Uh, Tell me a little bit more about that. What's it really about, the catalyst for the story, and then just where you see it kind of going without spoiling too much.
Sure. I mean, I don't really think it's spoiling much. It's just it's a story about a midlife crisis, kind of.
Yeah.
Somebody who has had a 25-year career in the fire department, but feels unfulfilled because they're afraid of fire, and they feel like a coward because they bring the baggage of their father, Ruben. His father was a firefighter who died in the line, and so he's been afraid of fire, but he felt like he had these shoes to fill. So he took the job, and he's made a career out of it. And he had a family, got married, divorced, has a grown son. Ripped straight out of my life, right?
Yeah.
And now he's got a new wife, and he's getting closer to retiring. He's going to turn 50, and then he finds out that his new wife is pregnant, and so that like the sort of the shame of looking back at all the things you haven't accomplished, or the things that you don't like about yourself, sort of drives him into an act of courageousness where he saves a dog in a fire and then learns that he's fireproof.
Yeah.
And so going forward from there, it's like, how does it, this guy now knows he has this gift, and there's a whole mystery, obviously, involved about why he has the gift and his father and all this other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But really, for it's like, you have this gift. What are you going to do about it? Well, I'm going to try to hero at 50. And so that's the basic premise for that story.
I love it, and I remember reading the issue. What I loved about when you sent me the preview of it, of there's a lot of setup to of who he is, where he's at in his life, what he's going through. Like he's going to be a hero eventually because that's what the book's title says. But it's a lot of like relatability of like you said, dad and divorce and things like that, and you go, wow, the setup for it was so beautifully done in my opinion, because I feel like I'm more invested now into how's he going to navigate and balance all of this stuff that's going on while going, oh crap, I'm now a superhero apparently too.
Yeah, that's the idea, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
give him the obstacles, and like for me, it's just really about try to a grounded story. Like I try to approach things even with superpowers or aliens or lasers. Like you try to ground it in something that feels real. Because one thing that also that I've learned is that specific is not a bad thing, because specificity of your experience, people find universality in it, right? They find their version of what's in their life, or their experiences, their traumas, their pains, their love, their loss,
Yeah.
that's similar to what you're saying. So like I think uh, people can be afraid of being too specific, but I think that's actually the thing that makes it universal in some weird way.
Yeah.
And so like me, it's picking out things that were real in my life and personal. Like I have two young daughters now. They're 3 and 6, and I have a son who's 23. So like in some on some level, I'm Ruben.
Yeah.
He's half Puerto Rican. I'm half Puerto Rican. The other half is Chinese for Ruben, because my brother-in-law, my wife's sister's husband, I think it's still brother-in-law. He's a firefighter for LAFD, and he's Chinese. So I kind of mashed this, and he had a kid at 50 also. So I kind of mashed our two lives together to create Ruben.
So cool. And I love that you pull so much from, like you said, your life and things. And apparently late 90s superhero movies really traumatized you as a child. So
I was more like Ruben in that I definitely was not the Sean character in those conversations. And I think I've gotten even more easygoing in terms of my judging movies.
yeah.
But when you're in your 20s, man, like you think you know everything and everything sucks.
Yep.
So trying to capture that.
And we'll just say that as you're watching the interview and then saying, oh well, I need to read this comic, and you'll read him, like, and you're either gonna be on Brian's side or you're gonna be on my side of going, I liked it. But there's a little bit of an age gap there, so it works. So, but no, it is just it's really cool. Do you have this mapped out? Kind of like I know with comics, it's sometimes like you can't be like, oh, I'm gonna do this ongoing, or is it like? But do you? How far do you have this kind of mapped out in your head that where you want to take it if you
So
can?
that's the sad reality of comics is the economics, right? Like,
Right.
uh, comics aren't selling as well right now as they were even a year ago, and so we just don't know how many issues you're going to get, right? Before it's financially not feasible to create the comic anymore. I know for sure we're doing 6 issues,
Okay.
and so I think um, the real creative challenge is a satisfying ending at the end of the volume, that also leaves the door open, because I do have like there's so much there. It gets bigger. It's like this type of story that starts very small, and then as the layers are peeled back, it gets bigger and bigger. If there's a chance I don't get to tell the bigger story, right?
Right.
Which is fine, because to me the what interests me most about it is what he's going through, like what he's going through, the
Yeah.
pain of his father and the shame and all that kind of stuff. Like that's the most interesting thing. So we'll get, we're gonna do 6 issues for sure, and then maybe if people like it and it sticks around, I would love to do 3 volumes. That's kind of in my own head. Like I would love to be able to go that far, but
So, but that's where it's at least mapped out in your head. But does it? I feel like I'm taking this into a writing 101 class with you because you're just
that's
so
all
not.
good.
But like, does it change then? Like, because when you're writing a screenplay, like like I'm telling this story, boom, I can be done with it. How does it? How do you adapt then for like you said, telling the story you want to tell with the pot, giving a satisfying ending because it's all done in volumes. Like you're gonna get enough for a volume, but say I
Yeah.
still want to be able to go more if I can. Like, how do you navigate that balance and balance that?
Again, I think it's more of an emotional navigation,
Okay.
because you can come up with the reasons, right? You
Yeah.
can change, you can tailor your story to be as long as it needs to be. Like Chicken Devil Volume One was only 4 issues. Like probably, I think that Volume One, like it flies by, right? Like
So
it
fast.
probably could have gotten 2 issues out of it, but like that was the container. It was like 4 issues.
Okay.
With the second volume, we still have 1 issue left that hopefully everything with Aftershock will be resolved on their side, and they can put out the last issue. It's like almost done.
Yeah.
But that one's 5 issues. I said I want to do one more issue than I did last time, because I just need a little more space
Right.
to tell that story. So I think it's just the emotional hurdle, and then you figure out, you game plan for it.
Yeah.
You game plan for it.
You know the possibilities, and so you just have to navigate how you're going to do that. So, well,
Yeah.
you got another book coming out in October, and you got Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong, and I know you pull a lot from your own life, so I'd love to know how you pull from your own life with Kong and Godzilla book.
Well, weirdly, I think the pulling from my own life is more about pulling the versions of the characters that I most love, right?
Oh,
So I think it's gonna feel like a very classic Justice League type of story, with like the classic versions of the character. Like I can't think of Superman and not think of Christopher Reeve.
yep.
So like that's who's in my head when he's talking. But it does start with an emotional thing. Like the launching point for the story is um, Clark Kent is going to ask Lois to marry him, and then they're going to go on vacation. It's his first vacation ever to celebrate. And so like Supergirl is going to step in into the Justice League while he's gone. Um, and so like that was like the emotional starting point for me, is that he wants to get married, and like he has like a conversation with Bruce about it. Wonder Woman gives his blessing. Then he goes to get down on one knee to do it, and Godzilla shows up, and so he's got to take off the suit, do the thing, and go face that. There's a lot of story. I set the whole thing up, so all the things make sense.
Yeah.
But like really, it's about it starts off from this personal place, and then what happens after that, you'll have to wait and see. Yeah.
Yeah. So have you always been how did this story, I guess, come about? Like, when you have an idea for like Chicken Devil or Midlife, I'm sure you write it, you pitch it. Did you have an idea like I want to tell a Justice League Kong Godzilla story, or was it approached to you and you said, yes, let me
Yeah.
do it?
Yeah, I mean, I was like, absolutely. Yeah, so I think two things happened. One is I've done a bunch of work for Legendary in the last few years.
Mm.
I'm doing an original graphic novel, which takes place between Godzilla versus Kong and then the new Kong movie. So I was already working on that, just like a little story that goes in between, you know, 90 pages or whatever. I was doing that. I did this graphic novel called Head Wounds a couple years ago. It was like Oscar Isaac produced, legendary. Like I wrote that, so I had done a bunch of stuff. Also the character Robert in Midlife is based on Robert Napton, who is the head of the comic side of Legendary. And
Ah,
so again, relationships,
yeah,
he's been
yeah,
my friend for, almost, I guess, 25, 26 years, whatever.
yeah.
And sometimes, the people get in positions where they're like, hey, I have this thing, and uh, obviously he knows I can write, and he's like, I want to work with people I want to work with. Do you want to do it? And so it was between Ben Abernathy and he, Ben Abernathy at the DC side. They're the ones who came up with the idea of doing something crossing over, and then they had, I guess, a short list of writers, and I guess they chose me and to approach me first, and I was like, hell yeah, absolutely. So
Have you always
um,
been so I know you're writing like with Legendary, you're writing, you said, for Kong, Godzilla stuff. Have you always been attracted to like that franchise, those franchises and things?
well,
And
Kong especially. Like, I don't know if you can see this, but this is King Kong right here. Let's see. Hold on. There we go.
okay, yeah.
That's Kong, and then on here I got Flash, right?
So you've got a little bit of a connection with it.
And yes, I had these tattoos long before I was offered
You
this
didn't just
gig. This
rush
was
out and
with,
go, you're like, oh, I got this book. Let's go get them on.
yeah, it wasn't. It was serendipity, I guess.
That's
Yeah, I mean, I have a weird like fascination with I think apes, like Planet of the Apes, King Kong. For some reason, they always intrigued me.
mm,
Big fan. Obviously, growing up, where it's like you had to have the before VHS and streaming and cable, like there was like the movie of the week at
yep.
4 o'clock, movie of the week on free TV. And so you'd have like Godzilla week, you'd have King Kong week, you'd have Planet of the Apes week, James Bond week. So I think a lot of the genre stuff that like emotionally resonates with me, I think is because of that. Like reminds me of childhood, reminds me of coming home from school and turning on the tube and seeing Son of Kong or what have you.
So good. Well, Brian, I want to respect your time. You've got a lot of stuff coming out. So in October, we talked Midlife. You've got the Justice League, Godzilla, Kong. Is there anything that we haven't gotten to talk about that you'd love to just hit on real quick? Or is like, no, that's it. That's
No,
my
I
focus right
mean
now.
we already mentioned No One. I think that's
Yep.
something that people should check out. There's a podcast that's in World, that is a part of the experience, this sort of cross-platform experience. Two of the characters from the comic book actually make the podcast, the true crime podcast, and it's Patton Oswalt and Rachel Lee Cook are the voices. So, and there's a lot of other voices there too. So like people that you recognize, and it's just a really cool extra or element that really rounds out the experience. So, I think issue 6 is coming out soon, and you all should check that out too.
Can I ask you real quick on that then? Like you said,
Mhm.
because I know the No One's a very interactive process with the book and the podcast. Do you guys write the podcast like as well
Mhm.
for Patton and them and kind of script it out? And do you play
Yeah,
into that then when you're writing like the book that you like, you want to give some extras in this podcast and things like that?
I mean, all the episodes are already written and recorded. Like
Yeah.
we had to basically do it all at once. So this is one of the hardest parts I think of this experience so far is while we were on like issue 2 of the comic, and look, I have 100 slide, I have a document on slides. It's over 100 long. It has all the details of everything about. It's so involved. Like there's so
Yeah.
much going on. It's a mystery. There's multiple killers. There's the newspapers. There's just, there's all these different elements, right? Like I said, we really were trying to do like a sort of like Gotham Central or Batman meets The Wire. Like that was our goal,
Yeah.
and it's hard. Um, but so we had to. I mean, we knew what was going to happen every step of the way. Stuff gets changed or fleshed out as you actually write it. But
Right.
we had to write all 10 episodes while we were still on issue 2. So that was a tough leap of faith for us, because
Wow.
once it's recorded, it's recorded. So we had to make some decisions and like lock those in.
Wow. Cause you're like, nope, we can't because then it won't sync up with the podcast. That would be wow. That's cool though. That's so cool to hear kind of the behind the scenes
Yeah,
like that. That's
yeah,
tough.
yeah, yeah. I think last issue we realized. I think I wrote something in there, and then we double checked. I was like, wait, that can't happen that way because in the episode that hasn't that's already recorded but hasn't been edited together, it happens another way. So like there's little things like that. You're like, oh, I gotta go back
Like,
and
oh man,
change that. Yeah, my biggest fear when this is all over is that all the pieces don't fit together, or there's like a puzzle piece left out or something.
someone's gonna go back and have like a board like Charlie from Always Sunny in Philadelphia connecting everything. Like, wait a second, this one
Yeah,
piece is off.
there's some dedicated people on Reddit who like already have their theories and this and that, and like like yeah.
That's
So
awesome. That's
yeah,
great. So, gang, like we said, no one is currently out right now. Chicken Devils, the second volume, hopefully the final issue is coming out eventually here. Midlife, Justice League versus Kong, Godzilla versus Kong. Like, man, Brian, you are busy. So
I
thank you for
am.
taking some time to
I
talk
am.
comics with me.
Absolutely, it was fun, and I appreciate you making those sandwiches. That's what made this
Yes.
happen.
It
So
is so
pretty
good.
cool.
Like, I was so excited. I'm like, I was because I was actually we were on vacation when I just posted that. I looked at my wife. I'm like, Brian, he commented on the video. He watched the video. She's like, who's Brian? I'm like, he's the one that created the. She's like, oh, that's cool. Like, she's like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
So
I
man,
appreciate
no,
it.
it's cool. We're now we just gotta you gotta just keep writing. You gotta keep writing comics and throwing in recipes so we can keep making
Fair
them.
enough.
Like
All right, I'll see what I can do for midlife. See if I can get a
that's the
recipe in
deal now.
there.
Yeah, he's gotta have something. He's gotta have some recipe. and
Well,
we'll
my wife and Ruben's wife are Korean, so maybe I'll see if I can't get a Korean recipe in there.
yes. Oh,
So
that would be
not
something
sure.
out of my wheelhouse. I'd love that. I love it.
Yeah, yeah,
So, well, Brian, where can people follow along with you just to stay up to date with everything that you're coming? Because you got a lot of stuff coming out. So, how can they follow along with that?
yeah. I mean, I'm on Instagram and on Twitter or X, whatever the hell you call it. I am
Whatever.
whatever any platform. Just look for Brian Booch at Brian Booch Booch. It's sort of phonetic, and that's where you'll find me. And I will be at New York Comic Con next week, so that's
Awesome.
also a place you can maybe find me.
Awesome. Well, Brian, thanks again for taking some time to talk about comics. And with that being said, gang, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.